life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another in our series of ongoing verbal essays brought to you in this television format. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. Bern, last week we were having a very animated conversation. We were discussing what causes people to be stuck in their lives, to have a sense of having abdicated all their authority and to feel like they have no control over the events in their lives. And we talked about the difference between having control and being in command. We also started to discuss your version of the next 5 commandments after the first tablet, 10, the third tablet. And we just got started on that topic when our time ran out, and I know that we promised our viewers we'd have an ongoing discussion and keep on with this train of thought because we had some great ideas. I know both you and I are really excited about what we were talking about, and I'm sure our viewers are anxious to go on with this.
Yeah, we got pretty animated, but tonight it'll be slow and boring.
Yeah, like it always is.
Like it always is?
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we were talking about the third tablet and some of the ways of recapturing our authority and esteem, which is a perspective, a different slant on what we hear an awful lot about empowerment these days. And most of it I find facetious and misguided or misdirected or inconclusive. And I do. I mean, I watch the videos and, go to the seminars and read the books, and I just get frustrated because it seems like they keep missing the mark, or they temper most of what they're saying in some spiritual way that it's hard to connect with.
You still have no control over it, or command over it, or whatever word you want to use.
Yeah, so we're saying, hey, there is a way. And by the way, we have literally thousands of people who will attest to a breakthrough, dramatic, immediate shifts in how they perceive their life and their world. It wasn't too terribly long ago when I had a guy call me, 3 different occasions. One guy named Steve called and said, I can't believe this. He says, I have been living, I realize now, in a cesspool of chaos in my family and business life, okay? And the reason I know that now, he says, is not that way. He says, having heard and integrated some of this information from like the Command Commission and Life Formula, Matters of Confidence, those kind of things, he says, I've got the tools that make the difference. And of course, that's the assets of our life. That's what we're about, is hearing those kind of reports and being able to verify them. Say, how does that manifest? How does that show?
I want to speak for just a minute about tools, since you're on that topic. If you're going to build a house, you can use a regular old hammer and nails, or you can use a nail gun. And I just want to make that analogy because I feel like the information that we share is a nail gun approach. And there's some really interesting information out there, and you can cull through all the great speakers and have a great pep talk, and you come away going, rah, rah, I'm so excited. But when it gets down to it, all you have is a hammer and a nail. And if you want to build a great life, you need a little more power than that.
Yeah, it's in concert with the analogy that we use, too, about you can't build a house nor a future. Either one with a blueprint. And that's fundamentally what we've been given by most of our authority figures, mentors, and parents and what have you. We've been given rules to live by, or a blueprint. And you can't build a house with a blueprint.
You need materials.
Yeah. Now, a hammer and a saw, or even a, what do you call it, an automatic nailer?
Nail
That's
gun?
not my bivouac. I'm totally out of my field there. But anyway, and even then, what kind of house can you build with that? So you have to have the hammer, a saw, and a plumb and a plane, and a joiner. All the tools that go for this. And then if you got a blueprint, you can create a cathedral. You can create a masterpiece. And so what we've been doing over the last 2 years is really articulating tools that people can either hold in their hand or in their head and heart and go out and make an immediate difference. I had a delightful experience some time ago. A friend of mine named Michael, one of the most well-read young people I've ever known, very articulate and what have you, a serious reader. And he called me one day really excited. He had seen some of this material up to a dozen times. And he calls and he says, "Bern, he's like, got it." And I said, "Well, what's this, Mike?" And he says, "I've finally been able to articulate now and identify what this has done for me." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's given me a sense of verticalness." And I said, "Well, what does that mean, Mike?" And he said, "Well, it's kind of like in the past, I was kind of moving through life, prone or supine, flat down, and everyone else around me was the same way, and people were doing things and making choices and decisions that influenced me in such a way that I didn't even realize it till it was too late. And so I was in a constant state of accommodation or reaction or trying to, correct everything." And he says, "For the first time, it seems like I'm standing up now, and I can see this stuff occurring way off in the future. I can see it developing, and so I can take immediate action in order to stay in command of the direction I'm going."
Wow, what a powerful analogy.
Yeah, and I thought, whoa, that's great. So I called another guy named Stephen, who might be on the show, by the way, in a couple of weeks. We're kind of excited about the possibility. Incredibly articulate young guy, and a real advocate. And so I called him and I said, "Stephen, guess what Michael just told me?" And I gave him the thing about verticalness. He said, "Oh, yeah." He said, I've always seen the material as my fire tower." And I said, "What do you mean the fire tower?" And he said, "Well, I come from a part of the country where you can go up these fire towers, okay? And when you're up there, you can see way off. You can see animals and bear and, all this kind of thing, and you can see people camping and hiking and what have you." And he said, "But when you're on the forest floor, they can be just a tree or two away, and you can't see them." He said, "But in that fire tower, you really get a sense of being able to, pre-perceive, examine, make choices that will influence what occurs when they actually appear." I mean, so he was in concert with that too. And so I know it's easy to kind of, what do you call it? What are those things? Or clickers? Click
Change the
by.
channel?
Yeah, whatever. Like I say, I'm like that big way. And to move on, say, I wonder what those people are talking about, and go right by the very thing that could make a dramatic difference in your life. It's like breakthrough time. So I define breakthrough as that moment when you go, "Whoa, I've got a solution. Didn't even know I had a problem. I just thought that's the way things were." See, there's massive numbers of people out here that whatever is happening, they just figure that's the way it works. That's the way things are, and they don't have to be.
Well,
They
we're
just don't have to
told
be.
that's the way things
Oh,
are.
I know.
Learn to accept the things you can't change. It'll never be any different. They'll always be that way. You'll always be the way. That's what life is.
Yeah.
So
And-
we settle.
I can't even imagine going back to that state now. I had a period in my life for years where I lived in frustration and agitation. I was volatile. And over the years, because of that, just thinking and wondering and watching and writing and reading and experimenting with these things, we've developed a lot of these things where, there's a peace of mind and a sense of balance and a rightness. It's okay that I would want everyone to experience and enjoy. Other people seem to be striving for it and promising it and what have you, but people seldom find it. And I've got a lot of graduates who say yes, it can be that way. And what it's about, like we were talking about last week, is recapturing authority. Recognizing that we indeed are responsible. But how can you be responsible if you don't have the authority? Well, that comes from capacity. In other words, the powers that be, whether it be God or circumstance or source, has seen fit somehow to give us a cognitive mind, which is a product of 115 billion brain cells, which can produce the number of synapses, which are a point of understanding or wisdom or ability, equal to the number of grains of sand and droplets of water on the planet. I mean, nothing in the universe can be equated with what's inside your cranium. How dare we take that for granted? How dare we? And yet we haven't been inspired, stimulated, facilitated in this direction. And this is essentially what we're talking about here. Getting back to the third tablet. Thou shalt regularly acknowledge and celebrate your capacities. That's what I've just been doing. it's a wow. You know what I mean?
we
Every
don't even
morning.
realize what our capacities are. Most of us
I
don't
know.
realize what our
It
capacities
hasn't been
are.
given to us because people are trying to control us.
Well, and we're told so often, oh, you're not the pretty one, or you'll never sing like your sister, or your brother's the one who can paint, things like that. Or well, you'll only ever be a C student.
Mm-hmm.
Because our parents don't want to disappoint us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the angle, you know. If they can
And
keep
so
us
we end up
confined, we
being
won't venture.
disappointing.
That's right. Mhm. Anyway, acknowledge and celebrate your capacities, which in turn give you authorities. Thou shalt accept the authorities that have been bestowed upon you. Authority to make choices and decisions and what have you, and then thou shalt assume the responsibilities that attend all authorities. Now that's what's uncomfortable if you haven't done it before. It's so easy to kind of relegate and delegate, negotiate, sublimate our authority and responsibilities. In other words, it starts when we're children. In fact, we might even make a list of this just to kind of hammer away at this. As young babies, children, certainly pre-6, we'll say around pre-6, our authorities, and I'm not saying this is all wrong, I mean, it's just the way it has to be, but get abrogated. Now, what that means is that an authority assumes some of our authority. In other words, an authority tells us what to do with our energy.
Our parents,
Sure.
our
Parents, teachers,
caretakers.
this type of thing. Abrogated, confiscated. You live in my house, you do what I say. Okay, in other words, you just confiscate a person's whole authority by exercising that. Abrogated, confiscated, and appropriated. That means to take it away and to use it for one's own best interest. Now, I'm not radical. I mean, I know that some of this has to be done with any child, otherwise you got a monster on your hands. But we have to be careful. We have to be careful not to stifle the exuberance and the excitement and the enthusiasm and the curiosity and that willingness to move out into the world. Because once that's been taken away, we have a product years later that can't provide for itself. And I've seen that over and over and over again.
I think it's so important to explain to your children why a behavior is appropriate or inappropriate,
Exactly.
and to acknowledge their feelings. Otherwise, I can see that you're really excited that we're going to Grandma's house this afternoon, and you're running around and playing and screaming because you're so excited. That's really a neat feeling to have, isn't it? And then go on and say, however, it's not appropriate to do that now because the baby's sleeping. You might break something that is someone else's.
Yeah,
that
it
would
takes
make them
work.
feel bad.
Takes
It
effort.
takes a lot of. It's a lot easier to say, "Stop it right now! If you do it again, you're going to your room."
Right.
You know, 1 or 2 sentences. But if you acknowledge their feelings, their perspective, and why they're behaving the way they are, so they feel appreciated and understood, and they realize that what they're feeling is not wrong.
Should I call that guiding and nurturing?
Yeah.
Other than molding and directing.
Right.
So that's a choice that we have. And of course, that's further enhanced by the society saying that parents are responsible for their kids. Can't be. You can be responsible to them. That allows you now to take that other tack.
Right.
And to coach and guide and counsel and communicate and what have you. Now, granted, a lot of people aren't prepared to do that, and so we have products that are unable to function.
And along with that, I think it's important that we also still give them choices. If you
Oh,
choose, if
yes.
you choose to continue in this behavior that we've mentioned is inappropriate, this will be the consequence.
And
of
then the
that
consequence
behavior.
has to be stable.
Right.
Yeah, realistic and stable.
You will go to your room and whatever.
It's like
If you
I've seen
choose to
parents
behave
ground their kids for a
appropriately,
year.
Right, right.
And then the parents are grounded for a year.
And
you
so
know, I
they
mean,
never follow through on it.
That's right.
So the kids don't believe anything that they're told because it's not consistent.
That's right. Abrogation, confiscation, appropriation. Then at 6 it begins to happen for ourselves because we're accommodating our authority figures, which in that mind is the closest thing you're going to find to a God. It's the source of our food, shelter, clothing, and love. And so we accommodate, okay, in order to satisfy. Okay, and so then we begin to participate by negotiating our authority as it gets negotiated away, and we'll get back to that in a minute. Delegating it, there's a delegation of authority, and it gets relegated, set aside, and it gets, sublimated, and it gets subjugated. Look at that list. Okay? Now, if we had time, we could go by and give examples of every one of these. For example, our authority is negotiated away. It's not untypical in our society where a person reaches a certain age with a certain preparation, goes out into the world looking for a job. That's the way it's done. I've been unemployable since 1957. Never had a job since then. Okay, unemployable. But I see it all the time. It's kind of like people line up as these job fairs. They've just been downsized, capsized, and whatever, and so they're without a job, and so they line up at these job fairs to get another job where sooner or later they're going to be downsized, capsized, okay, and they're going to be in another line looking for another job because they keep negotiating, so they away their authority in exchange for a paycheck, okay, in order to help the other guy reach his goals.
Instead of reaching their own
instead of
goals.
what yours might be. Okay, but negotiate it, to delegate it. In other words, we delegate portions, chunks of our authority to our spouse and some to our children or what have you, and that can be appropriate as long as we know what we're doing. See, and then relegate it, set aside. We relegate authority sometimes. We set it aside. So I'll not now, later. I'll pick that up later and I'll do something. But I got to get my head on straight right now. And then you get back and you can't find it anymore. It's rusty and you've kind of lost it or sublimate it. Constantly putting ourselves down in order to be acceptable. A lot of people live their whole lives trying to posture themselves to be acceptable, okay, and never feel accepted. It's real strange. Rather than just kind of accepting, loving, venturing. I mean, we're the initiators, and yet we tend to be the accommodators. And boy, I'll tell you, it doesn't. Now, you look around and you say, hey, it's working pretty good. No, it's not. When you cut through the socio-economic veneer that people present to the world out here, in their jobs and in the marketplace and on the street, you think it's working out pretty good. But my experience is that when you get intimate with people and you start listening and you open up to them and, start sharing ideas and concepts, you find a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of wonder, quiet desperation, aggravation and upset, frustration. Oh yeah, it's commonplace. And it's because and that's a product of all of this. It's a product of all this. And what we're saying is, if you're not careful, you get down here to the point where you're a shell of what you're intended to be by the capacities that you should be celebrating. I mean, that's not in concert at all. Now, most people say, what's he talking about? Well, they've never been tested. So, if you manage to get through school and get a job, and if they lost it, you might find another job. You may never have found out what it's like to be all alone, totally dependent upon your own capacities. And this is what we've been teaching for half a century, getting people free, really free, for the first time in their lives. It's fascinating.
I think it's important to reemphasize the last 5 items on the list here are our authorities.
Right.
Those are things we are responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we consciously or subconsciously give that up, it's a choice that we're making.
Right.
And so we can, at any point, choose to take it back.
Now, there may be we've been doing it without being aware that we had an alternative. That's the tragedy. See, in other words, like people say, well, I've heard this a lot, and I bet you've heard this somewhere, that you are exactly where you want to be in life, whether you'll admit that or not. You ever hear that one? You're exactly where you want to be, whether you admit it or not. I've never bought into that. Because if you haven't been given the tools, because if you haven't been set free to experiment and to explore and what have you, you may not know. People talk about comfort zone. Well, I've been there and I wasn't comfortable. You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of like you are exactly where you want to be. No, I don't think so. But now, once you begin to recognize these things, then it's time for making slight adjustments, practicing the new way, recapturing, testing, developing through practice your authority. And along with that goes esteem. And by the way, when you've got the authority and the esteem, initiative begins to creep back into our lives. We're able to venture out, make our own choices and decisions with less apprehension, with less fear. This is all based on fear, actually. This is going to be an exciting thing. There are some things to do. Say, if we're not careful, maybe we should hit onto this. When you've gone through all of this surrendering, accommodating, oftentimes people end up grasping their way through life. Sometimes I do this in the seminar. Grasping their way through life. Isn't that fascinating? That doesn't even sound good, does it? Let's get another pen here. What that means is that at some level, they are grudgingly reacting at some level to everything that happens. Okay? Reacting. Grudgingly reacting. And in some way, either subtly or overtly, attacking their source of discomfort. Okay? Because that's our nature to do so. All right? And then stewing about it. Now, I call it stewing for the sake of the acronym, but what it means is to make generalizations about. You know, to fuss. I'll give you some illustrations. And then we pass on the pain. No, we don't want to have it all by ourselves, so we pass it on.
Kick the dog, or
yeah, kick the dog, or spank the kid, or yell at the the employee, or something. And so they pick up and they grudgingly react and attack and stew and pass it on. And so it just kind of floats around here. Like I say, it's subtle, or sometimes it's terribly dramatic. I mean, I've seen cases where pretty scary. Oftentimes we attack in an irrational way. I remember, for example, there was an occasion, hundreds of occasions where, for example, a woman is really upset with a traffic circumstance, and she's aggravated and upset and making generalizations about women drivers. And the fact that she is one doesn't even occur to her. I mean, she's in this state, you know what I'm saying? Oh yeah, we can do that pretty easily. And usually when we pass it, it either accentuates or, begins to sublimate a little bit, but it goes on and on and on. Rather than having some clear way, some comfortable, conscientious way. In fact, I do it this way. We do have a chance. Now, I'm not in any way connected with, Dianetics. This is a big word in Dianetics, and I make no judgment about that. That's a whole different study, a different ideology. But clear is just a nice word, okay? Would you rather be clear or grasping your way through? I mean, semantically, this is a sounder word. And what we're saying is to be consciously and conscientiously. That's using the two best parts of the mind, our conscious and our conscience. Conscientiously. I'm not going to get that all on there. It's like planning ahead. Mm-hmm. Consciously and conscientiously looking and really seeing. Okay? And listening and really hearing. Every day I get exposed to people who look and perceive what they want to, rather than a reality, or they listen and interpret what they want to, rather than looking and seeing and listening and really hearing. But in order to do that, by the way, there has to be a sense of focus, being in the moment, and not pulling in past and future, just really acknowledging what really is happening, and then evaluating that experience consciously and conscientiously, and empathizing whenever we can. That's a love mode, empathizing. And empathizing is that old phrase about walking in another man's shoes. Yeah, acknowledging that perhaps I've done the very same thing or I'm subject to, empathize. And then to acknowledge what's really happening and accept that that's what's so. So what are you going to do about it? So in other words, this is what really is occurring, and then you have a chance to respond instead of react. And they both, this takes less time every time than this does. Now, this leads to efficiency, effectiveness, peace of mind, a sense of esteem, sense of balance, gives us more time over our own lives. It's just fascinating. Now, I got some suggestions on how to do this, of course, how to get over here, because how do you get from here to here? So it's easy to say.
It's easy to say, but again, it's a difficult thing to do unless you understand the steps that are involved.
Right.
And I wanted just to, for viewers who may have not heard previous programs, remind everyone that this material is based on a very simple assumption that we're always reacting from fear or responding from love.
Right.
We're either above or below the line of fear or love. And so if we look at that and remember, it's easy to see where we're at. what kind
Oh.
of feeling is in our heart.
Every moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. When
And
you
one is
practice it.
empowering and one is very disempowering.
Yes, yes, you're going to use that. Very quickly, we don't have a lot of time left, but in connection with this, one way to get over here, thou shalt devote portions of each day exhibiting your gratitude for the courtesies and kindnesses that occur, and forgiving yourself and others for past and current inappropriateness. See, there's two things here that we have to kind of get ourselves in a position where we look out at the world and appreciate, are gratified by all the really nice things that occur. Because if we don't, we're going to see the hateful and spiteful and negative things. We made a comparison some time ago about two birds flying over a desert. One bird sees nothing but carrion and decay and spoilage, and the other bird sees nothing but flowers. One is a vulture and one's a hummingbird. Same desert, but each of them seeing exactly what it is they're looking for. And we could spend a lot of time on that one concept, but developing an attitude of gratitude. And we have ways of doing that we don't have time to get into this evening. And maybe next time we're together,
That'd be great.
or soon, yeah, we can get into this. And then getting good at forgiving others and ourselves. And every single act that has caused pain or upset deserves to be forgiven, and we must be forgiven if we were impacted because we participated. And we need to really spend some time on that soon again. You can't talk about it too much, I find, because it's the core of recapturing our authority and being, quote, empowered. Again, my facetious nod of the head. And then, see, in order to get our authority back to wonder about and wander through and ponder over anything and everything, everything and everything that will expand our awareness while purposely practicing a personal skill that will enhance and enrich your life and those around you. See, what are you practicing? Today, tomorrow, it's going to make a difference. It's been Life Talk, Gina. Life Talk about life living and making a living. And this is our thank you note. And I'm going to sign off by saying that I'm Bern.
Moses.
And you're Gina Fitt. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.